Happy Friday. Yes. All right, I was trying to be that GIF that's on this slide, but I want to get right to it because I also want to leave you time to get work done. All right, so today is FRQ Friday. However, there's a few things I want to review before we get to that. So, first thing is, I looked over and took a glimpse at the study guides. I have not formally graded them yet. However, I wanted to review some glows and grows for this time around to be helpful for when you have to do this next week. So, first thing is, in terms of glows, I really saw that work was truly delegated evenly among group members. I think some groups worked really well. Other groups may have had some issues of communication, but ultimately you ended up figuring out, and that is most important, and that is part of the skill of group work. So keep up that communication with your group members. Also keep up that communication with me as well. Next, I saw the majority of you used outlines the most, some more effective than others. So I would say to that, outlines can work great. However, don't fall into the trap of using outlines because sometimes outlines does not the best way to actually show relationships with each other. So I would push maybe for next time, if you used an outline, maybe you might want to use another type of study guide. All right. So there was also a lot of good illustrations on some of these study guides to either show what certain vocabulary words look like or to show the relationships between terms. Now, in terms of growth areas, I think one thing I'm noticing is that there's still a lot of just listing out the terms, defining the terms, and there was an effort to explain how does the term connect or what does it mean, but visually on a page, it literally just looks like a list or putting it on a chart. And so that's not what this study guide is meant to do. Like, you need to actually visually also show how terms are related to each other, and I will show some examples. The last thing is some study guides did not have much visuals at all. And so I think anytime you can find an image that shows terms, so like for example, for meiosis or for mitosis, put those images because those images are going to be super helpful for you and for anyone who is looking at this study guide to help remember those terms. And then, like I said before, also not using enough variety of study guides. Like, it's interesting, like, you guys all, for the most part, use the same type of study guide. Okay, so shout outs for this week's assignment. So first, I am shouting out Rubeni, Genesis, and Victor's group, and that's because they were the very first group to reach out to set up a meeting. And then also, as you can see here, they also was accepting my calendar invite as it came through. So shout out to you guys for that. Next, on the actual assignment itself. So the first shout out I'm going to do is for Leah, Jahira, and Anna's group. So this is an example of one of the pages on the study guide. So here, I just want to stress and point out there's a lot of visuals. There's, in some ways, concept maps happening over here as well. And so it's really showing the relationship of words. So rather than just listing the words in the order they appear, the words are appearing where it is relevant. So it's like, okay, we're talking about mitosis. So now I'm going to list the steps of mitosis here: prophase, metaphase, anaphase, telophase. And I'm also going to show visuals here. Or in the cell cycle, I'm going to have a visual of the cell cycle and then use those words and explain what those terms mean instead of just listing it in the order of which the words appeared. Here's another example. So there's like a really good image here. Notice then they list those terms and then they define and explain those terms. Or for meiosis 2, there's a visual of meiosis 2. They're explaining and defining the terms here. However, this is not necessarily the order of which I gave the words. It's just that they're actually sorting and grouping the information themselves. So this is an example of exactly what I'm talking about in terms of connecting the words to each other. I also wanted to give a shout out to Leona, Darwin's, and Aisha's group because they did something similar to here. So, for example, with the cell cycle, they then listed the steps of the cell cycle, and in bold, they put the words of the vocabulary as they appeared as they're explaining it. So you're using the words in context. And then there's also an image here as well that shows an example of this cell cycle. So kudos to you guys as well. All right, so for last week's FRQ to transition, the glow is that people did pretty well answering parts A and or B. However, most of you guys struggled with part C, so that's the part that I'm going to go over in this PowerPoint. However, if you want a thorough explanation and someone walking through the answer for you, I'm going to include 2 links on Google Classroom, and you are welcome to watch the video on your own time, but I'm not going to put it on Edpuzzle to require you to watch it. So part 1 of today's assignment with the FRQs is you're going to give a score of how you did on this FRQ, and you're going to have the answer key, so you're able to assign yourself points, and you're going to explain why you gave yourself those points. 2, you are going to list the successes. So what did you do well in your answer? So did you do better in part A, B, C, or D, and why do you think so? You're also going to have areas of improvement. So which part did you do the worst in? Again, part A, part B, part C, or part D, and why do you think so? And lastly, in the future, how are you going to fix this answer in order to get a better score? So if you had the chance to do it over again, how would you re-answer it? So here's an example of some shout outs. So Genesis, I put as shout out in terms of how she broke down the question. So a lot of you guys were very vague in terms of the answers you were giving me in terms of how you would break the question down. So notice there's very clear statements and clear details of how I would study. In terms of looking at what are the facts you need to know, she didn't just say, okay, I just needed to know the steps of cell respiration or aerobic and anaerobic respiration. She actually listed those out and gave me important details that is important to know in each of these processes. In terms of relevant vocabulary, again, not just telling me the list of the vocabulary, but actually giving me definitions of the vocabulary and what is important to know about each of those vocabulary words. So when you do this Friday, refer to this as an example. And I will post this slide so you can refer back to it in terms of what am I expecting? Because a lot of you guys were very vague and were not really detailed at all. Okay. In terms of part C, so what I'm highlighting for her specifically is her work in terms of how she was able to arrive in terms of like the energy needed for the process of hydrolysis. So in the question, it tells you that this process is using 7.3 kilocalories per mole. And the question tells us we have 30 kilocalories. So in order to figure out the total amount of energy being produced for those molecules, you would literally just multiply the 7.3 kilocalories per mole by 30, and you will again get the answer of 219 kilocalories total. Now, in terms of what happens to the excess energy that is released from the metabolism of glucose, here is an example of how she explains her answer. So as a result, cellular respiration extracts energy from glucose, and so then the energy is then used as a part of ATP. So as a result, most of the energy is going to be used as like heat that's then going to end up being released. And so I asked her to put this explanation because instead of it all coming from me, I want it to come from your classmates, since it's more difficult for us to be able to work in groups and go over this in a classroom setting. I'm also highlighting Miguel's work as well. And so, in addition, he also got the correct answer, the 219 kilocalories. But then the other part, he managed correct as well. And so he mentioned he remembered about mole conversions. So in the question, you were told that normally it takes 686 kilocalories per mole in terms of to be able to produce ATP. However, considering that the problem is only producing 219 kilocalories per mole, if you set up some sort of proportion, you will then see that it's only working at a 32% efficiency. Okay, so just to review today's assignment. Part 1, self-reflection of last week's FRQ. You are going to self-score, and then you're also going to make some corrections, go over what went well, what didn't go well, how would you fix it. Part 2 is similar to last week. However, I'm giving you an FRQ based on this week's topic. So you're going to break down the question, tell me the theme, the facts, the vocabulary, and then you're going to actually answer the question yourself. Last reminder, if you have not set up a virtual group meeting with me, make sure to have this scheduled for some point by 4 p.m. today. We will use Zoom. I will be asking you specific questions on this Zoom, and then I will go ahead and grade all of this some point during the weekend and next week. As a result, since we are doing group presentations, I'm putting a hold on office hours since office hours are being used for the actual presentations. Last but not least, I want to shout out Alfredo, Anthony, and Serenity because they were the only 3 people so far who have actually followed the directions of office hours in terms of logging into the Google Hangouts so we can have that check-in. So, yes, important. Last but not least, again, self-care is important. So I want you to have a great weekend. For me, I think my plans are to get extra sleep. Also, just in case you may or may not know, I am currently planning for a wedding towards the end of this school year. I got engaged almost a year ago from this month. So late in April 2019, I was engaged in Egypt. That's my fiance. And also, I have a virtual hangout meeting with my friends. So BGM stands for Black Girl Magic, and we are going to meet up virtually to hang out since we can't in person. So before you go, I want you to tell me what is your favorite song that you like to jam to that keeps you pumped and happy. All right. Have a good one. Get to work.